Thanks for tuning in to The Real Deal Show, brought to you by ebodyboarding.com and Tribe Boards. Hey everyone, Jay Reale back at you again with another Real Deal Show with I said this before, my favorite co-host. Hi Vicki.
Hi.
Vicki Reale here with me today. She loves this stuff, right?
Yeah, it's my favorite.
We have a kind of a busy day today. We've come into the office here on a weekend to knock out this show and also to get ready for a trip we're going on soon. We'll touch on that later on. But speaking of trips, I thought it would be fun to do a trip down memory lane and talk about some of the surf trips that we've been on over the years, back when we were pro bodyboarders and even up to the present day. Traveling for waves is one of the most fulfilling, enriching things there is. Would you agree?
Yeah, we work hard to play hard. It's one of our things that we love to do more than materialistic things, is to travel and experience the different cultures and surf spots and breaks around the world. So it's definitely our bucket list is to keep on traveling.
And I think some of our best memories come from trips that we've taken over the years too. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, from when we met,
Yeah.
And you courted me.
I courted you. Oh my God. What is this, the 1800s?
Oh, what's a better way to do it?
We'll go to the box social.
Where you were hitting on me?
Oh my God. Okay. So, we've touched on this before. I became a pro bodyboarder in 1987. I went on a few trips before I met Vicki in the early 90s. We started dating.
Cool.
But let's move right ahead to the first trip that they were sort of separate trips that we took, but to the same part of the world. So we're going to wind the clock back to 1992. I was a professional bodyboarder with my main sponsor being Maury Bodyboards. Also on the team was Mike Stewart and Paul Roach. And Maury worked with the distributor in Europe, which was Hoff Sports over there out of France, to bring us over to Europe to do a Euro tour. And we were going to spend a month traveling around Europe. We were going to start in Portugal, then we were going to move to the Canary Islands, and then Spain, and then France, and just northern Spain, like near the French border, the Basque part of Spain. And then we were going to take a ferry across to the UK and hit up the southwestern part of the UK to finish off the tour. It was a month-long tour. It was really exciting to me because I had, at that point, I don't think I had been to Europe yet. And also it was scary to me in that, I was going to be traveling with Mike and Paul, but also you and I had started our relationship at that point, right? So
yeah,
do you remember this?
Meanwhile, I was traveling around the world with my girlfriend, and we had planned on doing the whole Europe vibe and
the backpacker
thing. Yeah, so we actually started in England, and my girlfriend didn't surf, so part of me was I wanted to try and meet up with Jay and the Moray crew. Thanks. So I was trying to coincide my backpacking with my girlfriend to meet up with you guys. So we started in England, and then I think we ended up in France, staying with Keith Sasaki actually in Biarritz, knowing that you were going to be in Spain, which was pretty close. So I tried to coincide, our Paris shopping trips with, you guys.
You had a weird situation though, because your friend didn't surf or bodyboard, and you did, and you kind of wanted to ride waves. You were just starting out in your bodyboarding career, but at the same time, you had made all these plans with your friend to sort of just see Europe, like a tourist, not like a surfer or bodyboarder.
Yes.
So you were trying to balance the two.
Yeah, and I was still a groupie,
You
following.
were.
I were.
Aren't you still a groupie?
I idolized Jay. So I was like, I gotta hook up with Jay and Mike and Paul, and the whole bodyboarding scene, I was like, frothing sponger back then,
Yeah.
grommet girl back then. So wanted to, hook up with you guys and find you over there and
Yeah, just be a part of the whole energy.
Yeah,
So, all right. So from my perspective, we left, I think this whole Euro tour, it was in August and bled into September. So we started out in Portugal. We flew in there. We stayed in the Lisbon area, and we drove up and down the coast during this Euro tour, just visiting shops, signing autographs, visiting beaches, and we got mobbed. I mean, it was crazy. I got a tiny taste of what I guess it must be like to be a movie star, a rock star or something.
Yeah. Didn't you sign people's cars?
We signed everything.
Yeah.
We signed breasts,
Ooh,
heads,
I'll have to
faces.
get one of those later.
We'll work on that one. Faces, cars, bodyboards, babies. We signed so many things, and the Portuguese bodyboarders were going bonkers. Like, it was nuts. And one of the little sidebars I remember is, like, the first day we were at, I believe, Costa de Caparica, which is one of the main beaches in Lisbon. It's like the sort of the city beach, I guess. And we paddled out there, and it was kind of, the surf was small that day, maybe like 1 to 3 feet, just onshore, crummy beach break. And I'm with the best drop knee guy and the best prone guy in the world, and then there's me. So, where do I fit in here? Well, I found out real quick where I fit in. We go out, Paul's ripping drop knee, Mike is like making these 1 to 3 foot waves look epic with his skills. And then me, I get up on this wave drop knee and I like fall because it was just a gutless wave. And this guy, this Portuguese kid, paddles up. Jay Reale, you are just like me. You fall too. And I thought, okay, I'm going to embrace that. For the rest of my career, I'm going to be the everyman. I'm going to be just like you. I'm not like these untouchable elite guys like Mike and Paul. I'm the guy that falls off my board just like you. So you too can be a pro bodyboarder. So that served me well for the rest of my career. But anyway, Portugal, we went through a few different towns over the course of about a week. Then we hopped on a plane, went to the Canary Islands. Same deal there. We went to both Gran Canaria and I believe we went to Tenerife. Can't remember on that trip. And then we flew over to France, the southwest of France, Biarritz, Hossegor, Anglet, Lacanau. And then we drove across the border to Spain and hit Sopelana and Bilbao. And it was during what they call fete season, which is party season over there. Like all the guys wear these red scarves and white shirts. And they have the running of the bulls in Pamplona and just all day, all night partying for, it seems like a week. I remember one of the cool parts of that was we went to this like meat eating contest in like the town square. There's like these dudes sitting at tables and they just bring them like legs of some animal, pig,
Yeah,
lamb,
and I remember
don't know.
we had calimocho, I think is what it was
Oh
called.
yeah, that was one of the
It was
drinks.
like Coke and red wine mixed
Calimocho,
together.
Coke. Yeah, that
I
was
thought
an
it
interesting
good.
drink.
I know you didn't. But.
Yeah, so in any case, so we were in Spain and I was communicating back and forth with you the whole time. It seems like by phone because I think I had a laptop back then, but email, this is before email. This is early 90s. So
and I was at the Backpackers.
yeah,
so
you were the
I don't know
Backpackers. So
how-
well, you would
Maybe
we would
Keith.
have designated times. You'd call me from payphones and stuff. I don't remember. Maybe
Yeah, I don't
I
either.
forget how we knew where each other was, but I think the plan was that you and your friend were going to meet up with us in Spain, and you were going to do this contest. So we went to Santander, I think this little town in the Basque Country of northern Spain, and there was a contest, or it was near Santander, and you competed, and I think we were just there doing promos. I think you did pretty well. Maybe you made the final.
Yeah, I think I got second.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
But at any rate, it was a very taxing trip because Mike is and was a very healthy eater, right? And he wanted to partake in all the cool things that a trip to Europe entails, culinarily speaking. And me,
You just want a baguette.
I'm a junk food, comfort food guy. So I was like, I don't want any of that. I want like burgers and ham and cheese sandwiches and French fries. And so Mike and I locked horns almost on a daily basis over where we're going to eat because we didn't have transportation other than the distributors' representatives that were taking us around in the different countries. So we had to come to a consensus for nearly every meal, like, okay, where are we going to go eat? And if we were lucky, there would be a few options right next to each other. But the distributor had to pay for us. So, he had to like go to different places so he could pay for the meals and get a receipt.
And didn't you eat at like 10 p.m.?
Yeah,
like
because in Europe in August, the sun doesn't even set till like 10 o'clock. And you're doing promos late in the afternoon. And some of the restaurants over there didn't even open until like 6 or 7 at night. So it was like a long day of signing autographs and shaking hands and then surfing with 50 local kids. And I remember that part of it. Paul, he was 16 years old at the time. It just got to him. Like everywhere we would go, there'd be like 20 cars of Groms following us to surf with us. So we'd paddle out and there'd be 50 people instantly in the water. So
Rockstars.
Well, yeah, it was like that. And
Yeah.
and they would like hang outside our hotel room waiting for us to come out. And, and then sometimes 2-3 hours. And then when we come out, they just drive and follow us to the surf spot. So one day I remember we were in the Canary Islands and we paddled out to this spot and it was like that. All that huge crowd followed us out and Paul couldn't get a wave because there's so many people in the water.
Probably wanting to show off in front of him.
Wanting to show off in front of, the pros from America. And Paul just snapped. He was 16 years old. He had a girlfriend back home. He missed her because we were in Europe for a month. And he finally just punched his board and started screaming like at the top of his lungs. And Mike and I had to paddle over to Paul and go, Paul, man, you got to cool it, buddy. We're over here to promote Maury bodyboards, and that's not a good look, man. You got to chill out. So
He's a grommet.
it
He
was
doesn't care.
tough on him.
Yeah.
And he actually, towards the end of the trip, he left early. He didn't go to the UK segment of the trip with us because he had to go back to school. It was early September by then. But anyway, so you and I met up in Spain, and I remember it was a little bit of a strain because, I was like on this tight schedule and I wanted to meet up with you and you were staying, I don't know, nearby. And so we managed to meet up and cruise to some of the same beaches a couple of the days. But it was a struggle. I mean, to meet up. And I missed you too because we had just started our relationship. And Mike, of course, I think he had recently gotten married to Lisa, or at least they were dating. And so, we were all like missing our significant others and under a lot of stress doing these promos. So, yeah, that was a crazy trip. And when we came back, obviously, eventually we met up back in California and all's well. It ends well. You remember any significant things of that trip other than what I've mentioned?
I wanted to kind of get my trip over with my girlfriend so I could go back to you and bodyboard around. So we flew back to America and pretty much caught the Greyhound bus from Florida to San Diego. And I said goodbye to my girlfriend and so I could be with you. And that was the beginning of our, initial traveling together, and then from there we've been everywhere. But
okay, so
we should move on.
Well, right now this is going to end up being a two-parter. I can tell you right now because that's only trip number one. I got a list. Okay, let's move on. We are now pro bodyboarders, and this is now the early '90s, maybe a couple years later. And we had always wanted to go to Indo. We had never been, specifically to Bali, and then maybe to G-Land. We were going to go over to Java and go to G-Land. So we had arranged a trip. We had some fellow pro bodyboarders, Brian Press. We had this East Coast friend of mine named Nino Mancari. And then we had Scott Carter, who's a videographer. He produced some of the greatest bodyboarding videos ever. Crave the Cave, The Inside, and Enough Said.
Yeah, and I must say that back then we were fortunate enough to have a travel fund, and our sponsors wanted us to travel and get photos and promote their products. So we would organize these trips. This one, probably our first one, where we're like, let's get a photographer, videographer, let's get all these other good bodyboarders, and let's make a magazine trip out of it. So
yeah, so that's I mentioned this in an earlier show, like many months ago, how those worked out. You'd have photo incentives, but you had to organize your own trips. You had to contact the photographer, contact your sponsor, make sure they would fund the trip, and then contact fellow pro bodyboarders. And the move was always to try to find fellow pro bodyboarders that had advertisers in the magazine.
Because you knew the magazine would run it.
Yeah, the magazine would be more likely to run the trip if the riders had sponsors that advertised, and the photographer could then make money selling the photos to the advertisers and so forth. So it was a win-win for everyone if you picked the right crew for a trip. Anyway, so we booked tickets to Bali
with our travel agent. We had a travel agent.
Yeah, we had a travel agent who I mentioned in a prior show, a guy named Paul Fairman.
Yeah, so behind the scenes with all these bodyboarders, we had to organize air tickets and buying from Hawaii, going from Australia.
And there was no internet. It all had to be done by phone. And I mentioned that again in an earlier show about how you had to book travel back then. It wasn't just like go on Kayak or Google Flights and find the cheapest flight. You literally had to call every airline and get the price for the itinerary and sit there on the hold and then on the phone and wait for them to type it up. Blah, blah, blah. So it was taxing. It took some time for sure. But at any rate, so we had booked this trip and we had organized a photographer from Australia, a guy named Marty Tullemans. Rest in peace, Marty. Passed away last year, I believe. And Marty was going to come shoot photos, and our friend Scott Carter was going to shoot video. So we show up in Bali, and we ended up meeting up strangely, randomly, with a pro surfer and her husband, Bill Ballard, and Rochelle Ballard. And she was like an up-and-coming Hawaiian pro surfer girl. And so we all went, we rented motor scooters, and we drove around and surfed Uluwatu and Kangu and, Bingen.
Not Bintang.
Bintang is the beer. you had plenty of those too. And, just cruised around Kuta, which is kind of the main tourist town there in Bali, at night, and just really took in all the sights, sounds, smells, cultural stuff of Indonesia. And it was an eye-opener. It was so interesting to me. Uluwatu at that time was undeveloped. There were a few what they called warungs, which were little sort of shacks on the cliff where you could get a 1 hour massage for like $5.
Yeah.
Crazy cheap. And they would make these jaffles, which is like basically Australian version of a toasted sandwich. And they were like $1 each or something. And so you'd surf, and you could keep all your stuff in the warung as long as you gave them some revenue in the form of massages or just ate there. And so you'd show up on the motorbike, and you'd have to hike down a long trail through the woods. And local kids would come up to you as soon as you got off your motorbike in this dirt parking lot. And they'd offer to carry your bag down to the beach, and they'd expect a little bit of money, and you'd give them a little tip, and then they'd drop it off at the warung, and you'd hang there all day. You'd surf a couple times, you'd eat and drink at the warung, maybe get a massage. And so we got there and we scored. Oh, you know who else? Was that the trip that Lanson and Aaron Kamano were also on that trip? Isn't that right? Pretty positive. Anyway, maybe not. But in any case, we got super fun waves at Uluwatu and Bingen, and we were waiting for Marty Tullemans to show up, and he didn't show up on the day he was supposed to arrive. So we were like freaking out. We were like, man, we just convinced our sponsors to spend all this money to get us here, and
no photographer
to complete this whole package. And so we started calling Riptide's office. Riptide was a bodyboard magazine out of Australia, and they couldn't reach him. Couldn't reach him.
Yep.
MIA. So the long and short of it is, just to cut to the chase, he was in the hospital. And I won't get into details about why he was in the hospital, but suffice to say he wasn't going to show up. So there we were without a photographer. So now we were relying on our buddy Scott Carter, the videographer, to at least get some video of the trip. But Scotty was kind of more focused on surfing. He didn't really want to shoot.
There too.
Lori, I don't think at the time, I don't think she was there. Was she? I don't remember that.
Was.
But in any case, surfing was kind of higher on his priority list. He wasn't fully committed to shooting video of us. So there was a couple of, pleas to Scotty. Hey, man, can you shoot for like just an hour? And it would be firing out there, and maybe he'd get a little bit of footage, but he wanted to surf. So at some point after a week in Bali, we decided to go elsewhere. I'm doing all the talking.
No,
you need to butt in.
It's good. You're a good storyteller. I'll just fill in the blanks. So.
Okay, do you have a blank to fill in?
Didn't we go? Let's go to
G-Land.
G-Land. Sorry. So I don't know if we contacted our travel agent again. Did
No.
We
We went to this office downtown in Kuta that was booked your trip to G-Land. So you go in there and they booked the overland. It was a mission to get there at that time. You had to take a van across the island of Bali, which took like 5 hours.
Yeah, overnight.
It was an overnight trip. Then you would show up at the ferry that took you across the Java Strait over to the eastern tip of Java. You'd land there and you had another like hour or two in a van on that side, and then you come to this lagoon, and then they put you on a boat and you take this like this little boat. I forget what they're called, but anyway, you take this boat to the camp at G-Land.
And didn't you have Bali Belly?
That's coming at the end. I'll get to that in a minute. So we did the overnight we did the whole thing. We got on the ferry, which was just so third world. It's not even funny, and we get to G-Land, and there were 2 camps at G-Land at that point. By the way, nowadays you can take a fast boat straight from like the Kuta area to G-Land. It takes like 2 hours on like a hydrofoil or something. It's crazy fast. That'd be nice. And there's a few camps at G-Land. I don't know how many, but back then there were 2. So we got into the camp. We checked in. It was pretty cool. We had these little huts on stilts, big enough to fit 2 people.
No doors. Windows.
No doors. There was, there were like bamboo walls, but and just open air hut, and it was raised up presumably to keep snakes out, I guess. But
and a bed with a mosquito
net over a mattress on the ground. It wasn't even a bed. It was just a mattress on the bamboo floor of the hut. So we proceeded to settle in there, and it was absolutely gorgeous, just like we had seen in all the magazines and movies. There was these just reeling left-handers peeling down this reef, like absolute perfection. And we scored. We got a really good swell. I remember it being like 6 to 8, some 10-foot sets. And Garrett McNamara was there, I remember, as well at the same time. This is kind of before he was the Garrett McNamara world champ big wave rider guy.
And I'll never forget Garrett one night at dinner stuck a spaghetti up one nostril, bring it through the other, and was going like this.
It was like mouth, nose, or whatever. He did one of those. You've seen people do that. He was really good at that.
It's a funny memory.
So we were in G-Land, and I remember specifically one night. You want to tell about that story in our hut, Vicki?
So we told you the mattress is on the ground with the mosquito net, and it's all open, and we see this shadow, and we're like, what the heck's that? And there's like rumbling and terrified. I don't know, did you get up? I'm like, Jay, get up, see what it was. And we thought it was a tiger.
So, first let me backtrack. Okay. So when you arrive to G-Land, they warn you that there are tigers in the jungle that sometimes amble into the camp. There are also monkeys. Monkeys aren't really a hazard, but the tigers obviously are. And in fact, there's a spot near G-Land called Tiger Tracks. It was a right-hander. We never did surf that wave, but and you could actually, they would show you in the sand around the beach where there were tiger paw prints. And they tell you, if you have to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, use a flashlight, look around before you leave your hut. And then when you go to the bathroom, it was an open air, it was like an outhouse without a roof on it. Yeah. And there was like a toilet, and they'd tell you, look inside the toilet before you go to make sure there's no snakes in there, right? That you're going to sit down. So anyway, so we were aware there were creatures lurking around the huts. And one night we were lying there, and it was a semi-overcast night, but a full moon. And we're laying there sleeping, and we hear this flapping inside our hut. And we couldn't see anything. It's super dark because there was a cloud over the moon at that moment. And we couldn't see anything. All we could hear is...
Yeah, so of course I'm like, Jay, it's a tiger.
Yeah, she thought it was a monkey or a tiger. And literally the hut is like maybe 10 by 10. It's tiny. It's like 100 square feet. So the size of a big walk-in closet, I guess. So we're thinking there's a tiger that's 3 feet away from us, and it's sniffing around.
We've got nowhere to go.
Eat our face off. So we're just laying there basically paralyzed with fear for about 2 minutes and listening to this flap, flap, flap. And then the clouds pass away from the moon, and the bright, shining moon comes in, and we see it's a sheet that we had hung up on a line in the hut that was flapping against the wall of the hut. Whap, whap, whap. So obviously we dodged a bullet on that one. We still have a
picture somewhere of that. We should try
Well,
to find
we
it.
do have a picture of us sitting in the hut. It's at home, I think, at the front of the hut. So, so that was G-Land. And then towards the end of the trip, I would never forget, I had steak the last night of the trip and woke up the next morning, the day we were leaving, and I just felt like death. My stomach was just tweaked and had to make that long trek all the way back to Bali, just on the verge of puking. And when we got on the ferry, I had to use the bathroom in the ferry, and I remember it just being horrific. It was basically, you open it was a tiny, like a closet with a hole in the ground and a bucket of water. No toilet paper, right? So you had to squat over the hole, do your business, and then pour the water, which I'm sure was filtered.
Super clean, yeah.
Yeah, it was in a plastic, like a mixing bowl with a handle on it. And you pour that on your butt to wash it off. Oh my God. So yeah, that took me a couple days to recover from Bali belly, as they called it.
So Bali belly is from food, right?
Yeah, it's a foodborne. It's like Montezuma's Revenge, as they call it when you go to Mexico or whatever. Yeah, it was just, I ate something bad. And then, so we got back to Bali. We had 1 or 2 more days there, and that was the end of that trip. So that was a pretty cool one as well. Any highlights that you remember that we can mention? Some we can't.
Yeah, I know. Can't mention some stories. No, just, the remoteness of, G-Land and the waves, and I'm sure it's not like that anymore. I bet you there's some resorts there, are there? I don't know.
Yeah, G-Land, I don't think there's resorts, but there's there's several camps there now, and they're probably, who knows, way better quality. In fact, Indonesia in general has changed dramatically since our first trip there. We went back again on a later trip, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to wrap up this show, and then we'll continue on. This might be a series here, is what I'm seeing.
Well, it could be like 18 shows.
Well, no, I mean, I have a list of trips I'd love to tell you guys about. But
we got some stories.
So this one went about a half hour. So I'm going to wrap this one up. That's 2 trips in the bag. We'll talk about the next ones on the next show. Thank you guys for tuning in to The Real Deal Show. Hope you've enjoyed these stories of history of our bodyboarding careers
back in the day,
and we'll tell you some more in the future. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're on there now. Also hit the like thumbs up button and give us some comments. And if you listened on the audio podcast, thank you for that. We'll see you next time. And as always, see you in the surf.